if a young person comes and makes a disclosure of child abuse, I've spoken to staff who are quite significantly traumatised by the information they've heard. And I think it's all right to be afraid. However, training kicks in and their professionalism has to kick in, and therefore they need to know this is what I need to do next.
And that's the position in which many teachers will find themselves. Estimates suggest that as many as 175,000 school children could suffer some form of abuse or neglect. But what are some of the signs to look out for? And what should a teacher do if he or she suspects it's happening? This programme aims to provide some answers.
We have young people who come in, they're dirty, their clothes are clearly not washed, they're hungry, they arrive very early. You know, they arrive in school at 6:30 in the morning and they're last to leave because clearly they feel more secure in this environment and they feel safer here than they do at home. And that would clearly be a sign, you know, of some neglect, perhaps, for that young person.
Teachers can't afford to ignore these signs. Involving colleagues is essential because one piece of information may form part of a jigsaw which completes a more serious picture.
If any member of staff does become concerned about a case of neglect, it's really important that they take early steps to record that, but also to have a conversation with a designated person within the school. It may be that individually those situations aren't of major concern, but collectively, when we see the overall picture, it might lead us to be much more worried about a child's safety.
If there are signs of neglect in one child, it may mean there are others in the family, possibly at different schools, who could also be suffering.
The boy was about 14 years old. He was the oldest of the family. We had a younger brother in school, but there were others in primary school, mother at home. And the boy was just generally dirty, uncared for, no friends. And I'm afraid began to become quite difficult in school. He could get very angry. When you tried to talk to him about things, he would quite often just fly off the handle. We did involve other agencies and we did report it as a child protection case.
Teachers clearly have serious responsibilities in these areas, but they are not alone.
I think it's really important that people actually do respond calmly in these situations, not to be feeling that they actually have the responsibility for the next steps. That will be something that the designated member of staff in the school will be able to assist with. They'll be able to help them communicate their concerns to other agencies, and it really isn't an individual responsibility. I think it's really important that we reassure colleagues in teaching that that's the case.
The signs of sexual abuse are amongst the most difficult to spot. One warning sign can be a sudden change in a pupil's behaviour or character.
There are, of course, some physical signs associated with sexual abuse, but it's unlikely that within a school setting people would actually see those sorts of indicators of that form of abuse. However, they're much more likely to be observing emotions and behaviours that become more extreme. For instance, withdrawn behaviour, and perhaps a young person who's unable to concentrate because they're preoccupied with concerns about what might be happening at home. But of course there can be other examples where children might act out, they may become more aggressive and may become more hostile.
Often sexual abuse is only detected when a sufferer can be encouraged to disclose it to a trusted adult in school. Confrontational approach is rarely, if ever, effective.
As with all students, we talk to young people and we give young people the opportunity and the space and the confidence to be able to talk to adults as they want. So, you know, we may recognise that there's a problem with a young person. Obviously, you know, we're not going to sit that young person in a room and say, what's the matter with you, you tell me now. But the opportunities are there at lots of different levels in the school, through the tutors, through the support staff, through the teachers.
A girl, aged 13, came to actually talk to a member of staff in school. This particular school, really good pastoral care system, and therefore it was very clear that the person who, in this case, actually was the designated person, child protection, pupils actually saw somebody they could go talk to. And she came to talk about what was happening at home when her mother was out. This had been going on over a number of years. And the reason why the girl told us was that she was afraid what her father had been doing to her, he would then start to do on her younger sister. And she felt that she couldn't keep what was happening to her, despite all the sort of threats and the pressures. And comments like, what would it do to your mother if it all came out? Or that she had to go into house because she was afraid of what would happen to her sister.
Any adult in school's response to a disclosure of suspected sexual abuse needs to be cautious. The key message is that the adult cannot agree to keep disclosures secret and must make the student aware of this.
You have to look at how to approach each scenario differently. Obviously, each is approached with sort of like gentleness and ensuring that the child in any way doesn't feel pressured into telling you anything, but also making sure that the child's aware of the fact that you can't actually promise them that nothing's going to go any further, that nothing's going to be said to anybody else, because obviously of child protection issues, they need to always be reassured that you can't make any promises of keeping secrets.
The signs of physical abuse can be easier to detect, but injuries to the body may be hidden, and teachers should be immediately suspicious if a student avoids PE.
Teachers, first of all, would recognise the physical marks. For any teacher, the marks are there if they're around the face, unless the child tries to hide that. Quite often the child doesn't want to change, so the child will avoid doing PE. You might get a child who actually, you notice, actually doesn't come into school on the days where it's PE.
Even if there are no obvious marks, it does not mean that physical abuse is not happening. A warning sign can be that a student becomes fearful.
They can grow to distrust, and therefore they will actually try and avoid being close to or contact with. And at times they will find any form of criticism quite threatening, or change of tone of voice they can find very threatening, because they associate that with what's actually coming next, which will be physical.
If a young person comes to their lesson and they've got a bruise or they've got a mark, the staff will ask that young person if they're okay and what's happened. You know, they won't put words in their mouth, they won't challenge them about it, and the young person may give a perfectly logical explanation, but there is a duty to pass that on. And certainly within the PE department, you know, in the nature of their work, they see young people and they're going swimming or they're out in PE, and they do look out for obvious things. They also look out for less obvious things where maybe a young person is very reluctant to be changed. And again, our job is to make sure that young person's got somewhere to go to talk about that.
A case involving a 16-year-old girl came to our attention recently, which was a very worrying example of physical abuse. She was not only experiencing bullying at school, but staff became concerned when they spotted some small round marks on her body that they weren't sure had occurred accidentally. She was unable to give any proper account of why they had occurred. She was very reluctant to even talk about the injuries. Although the staff suspected they may have been cigarette burns, of course it wasn't their role to diagnose those injuries, but actually they did make a good record of the site and the type of injury, alerted the designated person to their concerns so that they could then contact Children's Services.
PE teachers do have special responsibilities in this area. Some may be concerned about raising false alarms, but child protection is so important that these fears should not override the need to investigate or report any suspicions.
Regardless of your role within the school, the named person is the same, the policy is the same, and that you know that you're going to have the support of senior management if you do refer an issue. However big or small, if you think it's something that's just niggling you and that's not quite right, you know you can speak to the named person and they're going to take that on board. They're not going to think any less of you. If you speak to them, then you're doing your professional duty, as it were.
The term emotional abuse can cover a large range of things that can happen to a student outside school. It can be difficult to detect, but it's often characterised by a student who seems generally unhappy and lacks confidence. Low self-esteem is also a clear warning sign.
One of the cases that we often use in our training is about a girl within a family who has grown up feeling she's the odd one out. Mother rather than father in the house can be very disparaging, is putting her down. Words like useless. Why can't you do that? And even the comment that actually mother's saying, well, actually, I don't know why we had you, I don't like you. But what the school sees is not emotional abuse. What they see is an unhappy child. Or they see a child that for some reason looks particularly unhappy or something has happened. What they will start to do is actually start to try and find out what is happening and how can they help.
Emotional abuse can be very difficult to be able to identify because unlike forms of physical abuse, for instance, there may not be the injuries that go along with the abuse that's occurred. However, commonly it is the behaviours that we're looking for. So it may be that a child is very withdrawn or acting in an unusual way. So knowing the child well is a very, very good way of a teacher being able to assess how they would normally act as opposed to the way in which they're presenting at the moment.
If a staff member was concerned about a young person's well-being and certainly their emotional well-being, they would absolutely be very clear about wanting to pass that on. Because, of course, if a young person is so disengaged from everything going on around them and if their self-esteem is so low, it's going to be difficult for them to take part in a normal school life. They're going to struggle with the learning, they're going to have no confidence, and therefore they're not going to make the progress that we would want them to make.
Spotting the signs of the four main types of abuse and dealing with them, each present their own challenges. But teachers are not expected to take sole responsibility, and understanding the role of the designated or named person in school is critical.
We don't profess to be experts in this, and there is a named person within the school that we refer any cases to, and I think that's really important that people are aware of that and they understand that as a member of the teaching profession we are not expected to know everything.
Definitely a lot of it is a gut feeling. If you feel that some sort of behaviour or action that a child has done could be the result of anything, then it tends to be a case that we go to the appropriate member of staff and then we can discover if this is an ongoing thing, if they've noticed any changes in the child themselves, deal with it from there and keep a close eye on that particular person and see if there are any more changes or any more telltale signs as such.
Teachers are having to deal with a number of children most of the day, and it might seem very difficult at times to just drop things and listen to one child. I think what we need to do is to understand that for that particular child, it may be the one chance that they take to come forward. There may be the one chance that they take the risk to walk up to a teacher's desk, to stay behind at the end of the class, to sit and just keep their head down and hope that somebody's going to ask them the right question so that they can tell about their issues.